The afternoon sun slanted through the lace curtains in the living room, creating intricate patterns on the worn carpet. The house on Elmwood Avenue held 43 years of my life. Every scratch on the parquet, every stain on the wallpaper told its own story. The telephone receiver rested comfortably in my hand, and Kevin's familiar voice came from far away in Rochester. "Mom, how are things going with the roof? Remember you said it was leaking in the corner of the bedroom?" "No, Kevin, it's all fixed. I got a local handyman. His name's Jimmy. He's a nice-looking old guy, about 65 years old. Came by last week, fixed it up real good. Said it would last about 10 years. I adjusted the cushion behind me, making myself comfortable in the chair. He was a good man, not like those young crooks who came in the summer. They were asking a lot of money for the simplest jobs." Kevin laughed, the same laugh I remembered from his childhood, when he'd been a lanky teenager with awkward knees and disheveled hair. "Mom, you're 72, and you call a 65-year-old man an old man." "Why? He looks like an old man to me. He's got good hands, though, and he got a fair price, not like the young ones. You know, he said he remembered this roof from the 70s. Raymond did it back then, when your father was still alive. Frank's neighbor's car drove by outside the window. I recognized it by the distinctive rumble of the engine in his old pickup. Frank came home from his job at the sawmill at this time every day. 30 years of the same thing, like clockwork. Such predictability was comforting for some reason. In a world where everything changed at an alarming rate, it was comforting to know that Frank McGuire would drive by my windows at 5:30 in the evening in his creaky pickup truck. "Hey, how's your neighbor, Mrs. Connolly? You said she had heart trouble." "Oh, Mary, the poor thing's gotten very bad. They called an ambulance last week. When I saw the flashing red lights, I knew Mary was sick again. Her son came down from Pittsburgh, and now she's moving in with him. She's selling the house." I got up from the chair and walked to the window, pulling the phone cord behind me. It was a long cord, the kind Raymond had ordered so I could walk around the house without interrupting the conversation. Across the street was Mary's house, a two-story house with blue shutters that she painstakingly repainted with her own hands every spring. She was 80 years old, and until last year she had been climbing the ladder, waving a brush. Now the "for sale" sign stuck out on the lawn, stark white against the fall leaves. "You see, Kevin, you look at all this and you wonder how much longer you'll last in this house. Mary's only 5 years older than me, and I think she was as strong as I am now." "Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're in great shape. Remember last month when you dug up the beds all by yourself? And in August, you took out the whole attic." I remember. I grinned, imagining my son shaking his head on the other end of the line. "And the attic. There's so much junk that's accumulated over the years. I found your school notebooks, Hazel's childhood drawings, wedding photo albums. Time goes by so fast, but things stay." I pulled back the curtain and looked closely at Mary's house. There were lights on in the windows. Probably the son was still sorting through his mom's things. I wondered what he'd keep and what he'd just throw away. Every old woman has things that seem precious only to herself. Well, let's not get sad. Guess who's coming to dinner tonight? Hazel and Bradley? Uh-huh. That's right. Hazel called yesterday, said it's been a while. She sounded kind of, I don't know how to explain it, too chipper or something. And I think they want something from me. They don't come around like this very often. Kevin's voice grew serious. He always did when he thought I was being unfair to his sister. "Mom, maybe they just missed me. It's not all trick-or-treating. Kevin, honey, I'm 72 years old. In that time, I've learned to recognize when my daughter is calling out of the goodness of her heart and when she's up to something. Last night's call was clearly in the latter category. You know Hazel. When she needs something, she starts a conversation from afar. I walked back to the chair and sank into it, feeling the soft cushions take the familiar shape of my body. It was the chair my late husband Raymond had bought when Kevin first started school. It had seemed so luxurious then, dark green velour, high back, comfortable armrests. Now the velour was frayed in places, but it was still more comfortable than anywhere else in the house. What about Bradley? How's he been acting lately? Bradley's like Bradley. Smiles politely when he needs to, says the right words. He asks about my health, compliments my cooking. But his eyes, he's got eyes like he's always calculating something. He's sitting there listening, nodding in the right places, but he's adding up numbers in his head. Maybe it's just his job. Accountants are like that, habit of thinking in numbers. Maybe, but I don't think he's just working numbers in his head. Remember the last time he studied my whole living room? He looked at the furniture, the paintings, even went to the windows to check the frames. I wondered if something had flooded him, but no, the apartment was fine. It was beginning to get dark outside the window. The October days were getting shorter every day, and already at 6:30, we had to turn on the lamps. It was the time of year when one felt loneliness especially keenly. In summer, you could sit in natural light until 9 o'clock in the evening, but now at 5 o'clock, darkness was already coming to the windows. Mom, maybe I'll come this weekend too. It's been a long time. Of course you can come. Just let me know in advance. I'll make your favorite apple pie. Remember when you were a kid and you demanded sour apples? Antonovka or white, and he wouldn't even try sweet ones. I do remember. I can't stand sweet apples now. Do you still add cinnamon to the dough? Of course I do. And a little nutmeg for flavor. We were silent for a few seconds, savoring the simple intimacy that bound us together despite the distance. Kevin had always been a quiet child, even as a teenager, not much trouble. He studied well, brought home polite friends, and didn't bully girls. Unlike Hazel, who at 14 managed to run away from home for 3 days and then resented Raymond and me for worrying about it. Listen, I gotta go. I gotta stop by the store and pick up something for dinner. The refrigerator's almost empty. Okay, Mom. If you see Hazel, say hi. I will. And you take care of yourself. Don't work too hard. And say hi to Susan for me. I promise. Love you. Love you too, son. The conversation ended, but I didn't put the phone down right away. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock on the mantelpiece, an antique clock from Raymond's grandmother, solid dark wood case, Roman numerals on the dial, a melodic chime every half hour. After her husband's death, that silence had been frightening at first. It seemed that the house was too big for one person, that every sound echoed. But gradually I got used to it. I even like these evening hours, when you can just sit and think about something of your own. I put the phone receiver on the table next to the chair, not bothering to go to the machine in the kitchen. It was a habit I'd developed over the years. Why go through the motions when I could put it closer? Kevin sometimes joked about this peculiarity of mine, saying that my whole apartment was strewn with things lying out of place, my glasses on the kitchen table, a book in the bathroom, the TV remote in the bedroom. But it's more convenient for me. Everything is where I last needed it. I got up from the chair and headed for the kitchen. I had to decide what to make for dinner. Hazel wasn't particularly picky about food. All her life she'd eaten what she was given and given thanks. Bradley, on the other hand, he's a little more complicated. He always politely praises my cooking, but you can see it in his face. He's evaluating every bite. I guess Hazel cooks differently at home, or doesn't cook at all, buys convenience foods at the supermarket. There's chicken in the fridge, which I bought the day before yesterday. So we'll have roast chicken with potatoes and carrots. Simple, hearty, and no one will complain. Besides, it's the kind of dish I can cook with my eyes closed. 40 years of experience makes a difference. At exactly 7:30 in the evening, Bradley's dark blue car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as he carefully parked, leaving plenty of room between his car and my old sedan. Bradley always parked like that, with mathematical precision, as if he were measuring the distance with a ruler. Even in little things like that, his pedantry was evident. Hazel got out of the car first. She was wearing a new coat, gray, expensive looking, with some special shine of fabric. I hadn't seen it in the local stores, probably bought it at some fancy boutique. Her daughter's hair was freshly dyed the same shade of brown it had always been, but now with reddish strands. She looked younger than her 45 years, which was always a little annoying, not the youth itself, but the amount of money spent on it. Bradley walked around the car and said something to his wife, pointing to my house. Hazel nodded, adjusted her purse on her shoulder, and headed for the front door. My husband lingered by the car, scrutinizing the front of the building. His gaze slid over the windows, the eaves, the gutters. Strange behavior for a man who'd just come for a family dinner. The doorbell rang melodiously, the same tune that had been playing in this house for 20 years. Raymond had installed that bell when the grandchildren were small, saying the children liked the cheerful sounds. Now the grandchildren are grown, Raymond is gone, and the tune still plays. Hi, Mom. Hazel gave me a quick, superficial hug, the way one hugs distant acquaintances. How are you doing? You look good. Thanks, honey. And you look lovely, too. New coat? Yeah, Bradley gave it to me for my birthday. He says you gotta look after yourself. Bradley came through the door, holding a bottle of wine and a bunch of chrysanthemums. The flowers were beautiful, but they were clearly supermarket bought. Too regular, too identical, without the charm that comes with flowers from a real flower store. Good evening, Ruth. How are you feeling? He leaned over to kiss me on the cheek. It was a formal kiss, his lips barely touching my skin. Fine, Bradley, thank you. Come on in. Take your coats off. Dinner's almost ready. While they undressed in the hallway, I put the chrysanthemums in a vase. Bradley was looking around, his attention drawn to the ceiling in the hallway. Ruth, have you noticed that the plaster's coming off here? Right there in the corner. That could be a sign of a problem with the roof. I looked up to where he was pointing. It was indeed a small stain that I hadn't noticed before. It's possible. But Jimmy had the roof fixed recently, said it was fine. The local handymen aren't always competent at this sort of thing. Sometimes they patch one hole and the problem remains elsewhere. Hazel hung her coat in the closet and turned to her husband. Bradley, let's not talk about repairs right away. Mom, what are you cooking? It smells wonderful. Chicken and potatoes. It was your favorite meal when you were a kid. I remember, she smiled, but it was a strained smile. Do you remember how I demanded that the skin be crispy? Of course I remember, and I cook the same way now. We went into the living room. Bradley sat in the chair across from my favorite seat, Hazel on the couch. I noticed my daughter's husband looking around the room appraisingly. His eyes lingered on the antique dresser I'd inherited from Raymond's grandmother, the heavy-framed paintings, the Persian rug under the coffee table. It's very cozy, he said, but his voice was anything but complimentary. It's a big house for one person, isn't it? I'm used to it. 43 years in these walls. Yeah, that's a long time, Bradley agreed. Must be expensive to maintain, huh? Heating, electricity, property taxes? I get by. I've got my pension, plus some savings. Hazel gave her husband a warning glance, but he didn't seem to notice. It's just that nowadays many older people prefer something more compact, apartments in high-rises, for example, or special complexes for pensioners. There's care and companionship. Bradley, Hazel said quietly. What? I'm just thinking about Ruth's comfort. This house might be too much responsibility at her age. I felt something inside me clench. Had the conversation already started? Before they'd even opened the wine, Bradley was already talking about how I needed a new place to live. I'm fine with the house for now, I said as calmly as I could. I'm not going anywhere. Sure, sure, he agreed quickly. It's just something to think about for the future. Real estate is getting more expensive now, so maybe it makes sense to sell while prices are high. Hazel got up from the couch. Mom, how about I help you in the kitchen? Let's check on the chicken. Good idea. I got up too, grateful to my daughter for the opportunity to change the subject. In the kitchen, Hazel opened the oven and looked inside. The chicken was indeed almost ready. The skin was browned to a delicious golden color, and the potatoes were browned around the edges. It'll be ready soon, I said, pulling the kitchen utensils out of the drawer. Mom, don't mind Bradley. He's just worried about you. That's a strange way to show concern, offering to sell the house. Hazel turned away to the window, where the kitchen lights reflected in the darkness. That's not what he meant. It's just, he sees how hard it can be for old people alone in big houses. What old people? Who does he see? Well, his office neighbors, for instance. There's a man who recently collapsed at home, lay there for hours until his son arrived. If he lived in a special complex, a nurse would have helped him right away. I took the chicken out of the oven and put it on the stove. The aroma filled the entire kitchen, reminding me of hundreds of similar family dinners. But tonight's dinner was different. There was a sense of tension today that hadn't been there before. Hazel, if you think I should go to a nursing home, just say so. Mom, I didn't say that. And it's not a nursing home. It's a state-of-the-art retirement complex. They have their own apartment, their own kitchen, but they also have health care and services, which you probably have to pay a lot of money for. Well, yes, of course, but it's peace of mind. I began to arrange the chicken on the plates, trying not to show how much I was hurt by this conversation. Did my daughter really think I was failing? Or is this about something else? Let's call Bradley to the table, I said. The chicken's getting cold. We went back into the living room. Bradley was standing by the bookcase, looking at the spines of books. In his hand was one of my favorite books, a collection of O. Henry stories that Raymond had given me the first year we met. It's an interesting collection, he said, setting the book down. A lot of old editions. Some must be quite valuable. They're just books I like to read, I replied. Dinner is ready. Come to the table. At dinner, the conversation was slow. Hazel talked about her work at the insurance company, about the new rules that the management had introduced. Bradley made occasional comments, but mostly remained silent, methodically eating his chicken and occasionally glancing around the dining room. Mommy, did you get a new chandelier? Hazel asked, raising her eyes to the ceiling. No, it's old. Just recently washed it properly. Ah, I see. It just seemed different. Bradley put down his fork and looked at the chandelier. Crystal, real by the looks of it. They're expensive these days. Your father bought it, I said to Hazel. Do you remember how you liked to count crystal pendants as a child? I remember, I smiled, and this time it seemed sincere. I also remember how you used to swear when I touched them with dirty hands. You always came running from the street and grabbed the chandelier. I had to wipe it down every time. We were quiet for a while, reminiscing. Such moments happened rarely, when Hazel became just my daughter, not a woman with any plans and intentions. In general, Mom, have you thought about updating the interior? Bradley asked suddenly. Some of the things in here are very vintage. I like it the way it is. These things hold a memory. Of course I realize that, but sometimes it's good to freshen things up. Plus, if you ever need to sell the house, a modern interior will drive up the price. Here we go again, more talk of selling. Ya put down my fork and looked at my son-in-law. Bradley, I get the impression you're very interested in selling my house. Why? Ruth, I'm just thinking ahead. At your age, things can happen. It's better to think ahead than to make decisions in a hurry. What rush? What decisions? Hazel touched my arm. Mom, Bradley's not thinking bad thoughts. He just wants you to have a financial cushion. I have savings, which might not be enough if you need serious treatment or constant care, Bradley said, and selling the house could ensure a comfortable old age. The word old age sounded especially painful. I realized I couldn't hold back any longer. I'm not going to sell the house. This is my home. It's been half my life. And I'm in the right mindset to make my own decisions about my property. There was an awkward silence. Bradley and Hazel looked at each other, and I read something in that look that I didn't like. It was as if they'd discussed the subject before and now didn't know how to continue the conversation. Of course, Mom, Hazel said quietly. No one is forcing you to sell. We just want you to think about different options. The rest of the dinner passed in strained silence. I offered dessert, an apple pie I'd baked that morning, but the guests declined, citing that it was late and time to go home. After Hazel and Bradley declined dessert, I began to clear the table. The movements were automatic. 40 years of marriage had taught me to do it quickly and without words. The plates stacked neatly. The leftover chicken went into the refrigerator. The used utensils went into the sink for washing. Mom, how about I help? Hazel suggested, but her voice didn't sound very convincing. No, no, dear. Sit down and rest. There's not a lot of dishes. I'll be done in no time. To be honest, I wanted to be alone, to clear my head after the strange dinner. The talk of selling the house had hurt more than I was willing to admit even to myself. Of course, I knew that sooner or later the question of the future would come up in earnest, but hearing it from my own daughter was painful. I grabbed a stack of plates and headed for the kitchen. I could hear muffled voices behind me. Hazel and Bradley were talking about something in the living room. It was quiet, almost a whisper, but that didn't surprise me. Young people often switched to whispers when they were discussing something personal in the presence of their elders, probably planning for tomorrow or talking about work. In the kitchen, I turned on the hot water and added some detergent to the sink. The foam rose in white caps, and I dipped the plates into it. Washing dishes was always soothing. There was something meditative about it, especially in the evening, when the day was winding down and there was no rush. There was a muffled conversation coming from the living room. Sometimes Bradley's voice was a little louder, sometimes Hazel answered, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't try to. I'd never liked eavesdropping because I didn't think it was appropriate. If people talk quietly, it means they don't want to be heard. The plates were washed quickly. The chicken didn't burn. The potatoes didn't stick either. Modern non-stick pans made life much easier. I remember when I was young, I had to scrape off burnt food with metal sponges. My hands hurt from the effort. Forks and knives required more attention. I washed every utensil thoroughly, especially the knives. They always get greasy spots if you don't wash them well. Bradley, by the way, ate very neatly, hardly ever getting his utensils dirty. Hazel had no such habit. She always ate with appetite, sometimes even hurriedly. Outside the kitchen window, the lights of the house across the street were burning. The Myler family lived there. He worked as a mechanic in a machine shop. She was an elementary school teacher. Two school-aged children, a Labrador dog. A normal American family, the kind of family that all the suburbs of Buffalo are full of. I often watched their windows in the evenings, not out of curiosity, but simply because it gave me a sense of life around me. Today, the Milers had someone visiting. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway. Probably relatives had arrived or friends of the children. They often had guests in their house, especially on weekends. Sometimes it was enviable to have such an active social life. Voices came from the living room again. This time the conversation seemed more animated. Bradley spoke faster than usual, and Hazel repeatedly asked something. Maybe they were discussing plans for tomorrow or dealing with some work issues. Bradley had a lot of projects at the office lately. Hazel sometimes complained that her husband was working too much. I washed the skillet in which the chicken was frying. It was pretty heavy, cast iron, still from my mother-in-law. Such pans last for decades if properly cared for. Modern lightweight pans with Teflon coating are more convenient, but they wear out quickly. This one will last for many more years. The oven tray was harder to clean. The potatoes were stuck to the surface in some places, and I had to rub them with the hard side of the sponge. My hands were still strong despite my age, but the work was harder than it had been before. Bradley might be right about something. Keeping a big house gets harder every year. But selling it? No. The thought still seemed absurd. The best years of my life had been spent here. This kitchen was where I cooked for my husband and kids. This was where Kevin did his homework at this table. This was where Hazel talked about her high school romances. Every corner held memories. The voices in the living room grew quieter. They must have been tired after a day of work and the long drive here. Hazel worked until 6 in the evening. Then they had to drive across town during rush hour. No wonder they looked tired by the end of dinner. I rinsed the baking tray and put it in the drying rack next to the rest of the dishes. The kitchen was clean and neat again. Tomorrow morning, it will be nice to come in here and see everything in order. As I got older, little things like that became more important. When everything was in order, I felt more at peace. There was a small pot of geraniums on the windowsill. It was doing well. The leaves were bright green and a few buds were ready to bloom. Raymond had laughed at my love of indoor plants, saying I was turning the house into a greenhouse. But flowers made it cozy, especially in winter, when everything outside the window was gray and gloomy. I wiped the kitchen table with a damp cloth, cleaning up the crumbs that were left over from slicing bread. The table was old, oak, with a few scratches from knives and marks from hot pans. Hazel had liked to draw on it with pencils as a child, and some of the marks were still visible if you looked closely. The conversation in the living room continued. Occasionally, I heard the name Ruth. They must have been discussing me after all. It wasn't surprising after such a meal. It was logical to talk about how I was feeling, if I needed help. Hazel had always been a caring daughter, just expressing care in her own way. I stacked the drying rack with clean dishes and put them away in the closet. Tomorrow morning, I'll put everything in its place, but for now, I'll leave it as it is. My hands are tired from washing. When I was young, I could wash dishes for a dozen people and not feel tired, but the years take their toll. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner of the kitchen. It was old but reliable. It had worked for 15 years without a single breakdown. Modern refrigerators are more beautiful and functional, but this one suited me fine. Why spend money on a new one when the old one was working properly? Something that sounded like Hazel's laughter came from the living room, muffled but cheerful. Good, so their mood had improved. Maybe the tension during dinner seemed exaggerated to me. After all, talking about the future is normal for a family. People worry about each other, it's natural. I turned off the kitchen light and headed back to the living room. The hallway was quiet, with only the ticking of the clock and muffled voices coming from the living room. The house seemed especially cozy at times like this, when there were people in it, when it was filled with human voices. At the door to the living room, I stopped to adjust a photograph hanging on the wall. It was a family picture taken about 10 years ago at Raymond's birthday party. We were all younger then. Even the grandchildren looked like kids. Raymond had his arm around my shoulders. Hazel was smiling a wide smile. Kevin was holding his youngest son in his arms. The picture was hanging a little crooked. Someone must have nicked it while walking by. I carefully straightened the frame and took a step back, checking the result. Such little things are important. When everything in the house is in its place, it creates a sense of stability and order. The voices in the living room were quieter, but still audible. Hazel was saying something long, with pauses, and Bradley was occasionally inserting short lines. The usual marital conversation at the end of the day. Nothing special. Perhaps they were planning the weekend or discussing shopping. I corrected another photo, a wedding photo of Raymond and me when we were very young, 48 years ago, at St. Patrick's Church. The white dress I'd sewn myself, the bouquet of white roses Raymond's father had grown in his garden, a simple but beautiful wedding, as was customary in those days. The hallway floor creaked underfoot, the old boards making themselves known. It was part of the house symphony, like the ticking of a clock or the humming of a refrigerator. Raymond had intended to replace the floor someday, but he'd never gotten around to it. Now the creaking reminded him of him. He'd always said the house should be sound. Silence in the house was unnatural. The conversation in the living room was getting quieter and quieter. Maybe they were tired and getting ready to leave. It's a little late for Sunday night. Tomorrow is a work day. Hazel usually went to bed at 10 to get up at 7 in the morning. She's always had a clear regimen ever since she was a little girl. I slowly made my way towards the living room, taking my time. I wanted to give them a chance to finish their conversation, not interrupt if they were discussing something important. Family sensitivity is an art that comes with the years, knowing when to show up and when it's best to wait. The corridor was quite long. When the house was built, the architect had planned it for a large family. Wide rooms, high ceilings, long corridors. In those times, people did not save on space, did not count every square meter. They lived large, built for centuries. There was a long hallway rug under my feet, a Persian rug Raymond had bought at an antique store. It was beautiful, intricately patterned in red and blue colors. It had been in service for 20 years and looked almost as good as new. Real Persian rugs don't wear out. They only get more beautiful with time. The voices in the living room were almost silent. Stopping at the door, I heard only Hazel's quiet whisper and Bradley's short reply. They must really be planning their departure. The time is late, and they still have to drive across town. The roads are less congested on Sunday night, but it would still take about 40 minutes. I coughed quietly to warn of my approach and walked into the living room. Got it. Kevin has already heard everything through the uncovered phone connection while Ruth was washing dishes in the kitchen. And Ruth doesn't know it and thinks she just walked in on her guests in the living room. Continuing chapter 4 correctly. When I entered the living room, Hazel and Bradley were sitting on the couch in casual poses, but something about their behavior struck me as odd. They turned toward me too quickly, smiled too broadly. The kind of smiles you get from people who've just discussed something secret. Here I am, I said, settling into my favorite chair. The dishes are all clean. How are you doing? Did you miss me? Of course not, Mom, Hazel replied. We were just, talking about stuff. Bradley nodded, but he avoided looking me in the eye. Instead, he studied his fingernails as if it were the first time he'd ever seen them. What were we talking about? Maybe I'd like to hear it. It was nothing, Bradley said quickly. Work, plans for the week, boring adult stuff. Hazel got up from the couch and walked to the window. Her movements were sharp, nervous. She pulled back the curtain and looked outside, though there was nothing of interest there, just an empty road and sparse streetlights. Mom, is your heating all right? She asked suddenly, without turning around. Isn't it cold in winter in such a big house? It's fine. The boiler works properly. The house is warm. It's just that heating is expensive now, Bradley interjected. Gas keeps getting more expensive. It must be a lot of money in a winter. Again, we talked about money and house expenses. I was beginning to realize that these weren't random remarks, but part of a plan. They were probing the ground, finding out my weaknesses. I'm managing my expenses, I said dryly. Of course you are. Bradley finally looked at me. It's just that at your age, it's good to plan ahead. Save money wherever you can. Save on what exactly? Well, home maintenance, for instance. There are more economical housing options for the elderly. Hazel turned sharply away from the window. Bradley, we agreed not to push. I'm not pushing. I'm just expressing concern. There was an awkward pause. I felt that there was a silent communication between them, an exchange of glances and gestures that I didn't understand. It was as if they were acting in a play, and I didn't know my role. Shall we drink tea? I suggested, trying to lighten the atmosphere. I have some good cookies I bought yesterday. Thanks, Mom, but we have to go. Hazel was already heading to the couch for her purse. Tomorrow's a work day. It's a long drive. Sure, honey, I understand. Bradley stood up too, adjusting his jacket. His movements were fidgety, like a man who wants to get out of an uncomfortable place. Ruth, thanks again for dinner. And think about what we discussed, about options for the future. I will, I lied. Hazel walked over to me and leaned in for a goodbye kiss. Her lips barely touched my cheek, and it was a hasty, formal kiss. Mom, we love you, and we want you to be happy. I know, darling, I love you too. But the words sounded hollow, maybe because I could sense the falseness in her voice, or maybe it was because the word love had taken on a bitter flavor after today's conversation. I walked them to the door. Ruth, if you need help with any of the paperwork or financial advice, you're welcome. I have good contacts among lawyers and realtors. Thanks, I'll keep that in mind. They got in the car, and I waved from the doorway. The car started, but instead of driving away, it stopped at a neighbor's house. Hazel and Bradley were talking about something. I could see him showing her something on his phone screen, and she was nodding. After about 5 minutes, the car finally pulled away. I closed the door and leaned my back against it. The house was quiet again, but now it seemed ominous, like the walls had heard something they weren't supposed to hear. Back in the living room, I began to clean up the signs of the visit. I fluffed the cushions on the couch, collected the water glasses, and dusted the coffee table. The physical work helped keep my mind off the unpleasant conversation, but I couldn't completely distract myself. There was a piece of paper on the coffee table, some kind of advertisement that Bradley must have brought with him. I picked it up and read the headline, Sunset Gardens Active Retirement Complex. Below it were pictures, manicured grounds, modern rooms, smiling seniors at a game of checkers. So they weren't just talking in the abstract. They were already looking for a specific place to send me, studying prices, conditions, maybe even taking a tour. I thought they were just talking out of concern for my future. I crumpled up the flyer and tossed it in the trash. But the images from the ad, sterile hallways, identical rooms, the smell of a hospital, wouldn't leave my mind. Did they really think I'd end up there? The phone was on the table next to the chair, where I'd left it after I'd talked to Kevin. Suddenly, I wanted to call him, to tell him about Hazel and Bradley's strange behavior. But tell him what exactly? That they were interested in my expenses? That they'd brought in an advertisement for a nursing home? No, that would sound paranoid. Kevin will say I'm exaggerating, that my daughter is just concerned about my future. And he'd probably be right. Maybe I really am getting myself worked up over a few careless phrases. I picked up the phone to put it away, but instead of a dial tone, I heard silence. Strange. Usually, after the call ends, there's a distinctive beeping sound in the handset. I tried pressing the lever several times, but nothing changed. There must be something wrong with the phone line, or the machine was starting to malfunction. After all, it was many years old. I'll have to call the phone company tomorrow. In the meantime, I'll put the receiver back and hope that everything will be fine by morning. When I got upstairs to my bedroom, I couldn't sleep for a long time. My mind was reeling with bits and pieces of today's conversation. Bradley's words about options for the future, Hazel's nervous demeanor. Something was definitely going on, something I didn't fully understand. Outside the bedroom window, the leaves of an old maple tree rustled, a tree Raymond and I had planted the first year after we bought the house. It had been a thin sapling then, but now its branches reached to the second floor. How many more autumns will it stand in our yard? How many more fall trees will I see? The clock on the nightstand ticked measuredly and soothingly. 12:30 at night. Somewhere now, Hazel and Bradley are making their way home, discussing the night before. Somewhere in Rochester, Kevin is asleep, unaware of what's going on at his parents' house. Gradually, fatigue took its toll, and I fell into an uneasy sleep, full of vague images and vague threats. In the morning, I was awakened by the doorbell. It was sharp, insistent, as if someone was in a hurry. I glanced at the clock, 9:30. Who could arrive so early? I threw on my robe and went downstairs, peering through the peephole. Kevin stood on the doorstep with a small traveling suitcase in his hand. His face was serious, almost grim. I opened the door quickly. Kevin, what a surprise! What's wrong? Why are you home so early? Hi, Mom. He gave me a big hug. A real one, not like Hazel had the night before. I'm sorry I didn't give you a heads up. I thought I'd just show up out of the blue. Come in, come in. Have you had breakfast? I'll make you something. Take your time, Mom. Let's just talk first. There was a tension in his voice that wasn't usually there. Kevin was always calm, poised, but now he seemed agitated. Is everything okay? Is Susan okay? The kids? I'm fine, Mom. I just, missed you. It's been a long time. We went into the living room. Kevin set his suitcase down by the couch and looked around as if he were seeing the room for the first time. His gaze lingered on the coffee table, where the Sunset Gardens ad had been the day before. How's it going? How are you feeling? He asked, sitting down in the chair across from mine. Good. Hazel and Bradley came over for dinner last night. I see. How was it? It was fine. They were acting kind of weird, though. They kept saying that I should think about moving to a better place. Kevin nodded, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. He knew something that he wasn't telling me. Mom, do you remember our phone conversation yesterday? Of course I do. Why? After we said goodbye. Did you disconnect the phone? I was thinking. Last night seemed a blur after all the excitement. Honestly, I don't remember. I think I just hung up next to the chair. Why? Kevin nodded slowly, as if confirming something for himself. It wasn't a big deal, just curious. But I could see that it wasn't just curiosity. I could sense some hidden purpose in his behavior, some knowledge he wasn't in a hurry to share. Kevin, are you sure you're just here for no reason? No reason at all? What reason could there be? He smiled, but it was a strained smile. Couldn't a son visit his mother for no particular reason? Of course he can. It's just that you seem worried. Long drive. Got up at 5 in the morning to get here in time for breakfast. That explanation sounded logical, but something in his tone said that the reason for the visit wasn't a desire to have breakfast together. Kevin was clearly thinking about something, planning something. But unlike Hazel and Bradley's behavior yesterday, his secrecy didn't scare him. On the contrary, it made me feel safe, as if I had an ally in some obscure conflict. Kevin, you know what? Let me make you a decent breakfast, I said, rising from my chair. You must be hungry after traveling so early. Do you want pancakes? Remember how you used to like them with apples when you were a kid? That would be great, Mom. His face finally relaxed, and he smiled for real. I haven't had homemade pancakes in a long time. While I was making the dough in the kitchen, Kevin wandered around the house. I could hear his footsteps in the living room, then in the hallway, then on the stairs leading upstairs. It was as if he were exploring every corner of the house, but he did it unobtrusively, as if he were just reminiscing about his childhood. Sometimes he stopped at the windows, and I could see through the doorway that he was taking a long look at the street. Mom, what about Mrs. Connolly's house? He shouted from the living room. Mary died 3 weeks ago. Heart. The son is here from Pittsburgh, sorting things out, I replied, whipping the dough. They're going to sell the house. I see. There was a peculiar thoughtfulness in his voice. I added grated apples to the batter, the sour ones Kevin had loved since he was a kid. Some flavors don't change over the years, remain constant, like anchors in a changing world. When he returned to the kitchen, I was already frying the first batch of pancakes. They were fluffy and golden, with appetizing apple slices. Kevin sat at the old kitchen table and watched the cooking process with the same expression on his face that he had when he was a kid. Do you remember this table? I asked, flipping a pancake with a spatula. You bet I do. How much homework I did at it. How many times you fed me here when I came home from school hungry as a wolf. And how many times I had to clean up your artwork. Remember when you were 8 years old and you decided to draw a treasure map on the countertop? With a marker, yeah. You used to swear a lot, and Dad laughed and said, I'd make a great cartographer. We both smiled, remembering Raymond. He always knew how to find something positive even in children's mischief. Don't scold, Ruth, he used to say. He'd rather draw cards than sit in front of the TV. I set a plate of hot pancakes and a jar of honey in front of Kevin. He immediately slathered one with honey and took a big bite. Just like when I was a kid, he said with his mouth full. It even tastes the same. The recipe's the same, and I buy my groceries at the same store I did 20 years ago. We ate in pleasant silence. Outside the kitchen window, we could see the workers continuing to move things out of Mary's house. An old couch, bookshelves, framed pictures. A whole life packed into boxes and bags. Kevin was looking that way too, and his face became serious again. Mom, don't you feel sad looking at this? I am. Mary was a good neighbor. We lived across the street from each other for 40 years. She was always the first to notice if I had something wrong, like a light out or a newspaper out of the mailbox. And the new neighbors, do you know who's buying the house? Not yet. Realtor said there are a few interested families, young couples with kids mostly. They want to move from city apartments to the suburbs. Kevin nodded, but I could see that he remembered that information with a special attention, like it was important to him for some reason. Had you ever thought about moving? He asked suddenly. It was a careful, no-pressure question, but I remembered the conversation I'd had with Hazel and Bradley yesterday. Why would I want to move? I feel fine here. It's just interesting. It's a big house. It's expensive to maintain. And you're alone. Kevin, are you starting out like your sister? I put down my fork and gave him a stern look. Yesterday they were all over me about nursing homes and saving money. No, Mom, that's not what I mean. I just want to know how you're feeling, how you're doing with the house, how you're doing on your own. I'm doing great, and if I need help, I'll ask for it. It's not a small thing. Kevin held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Okay, no offense. Just caring. Caring is a good thing. But when caring turns into trying to decide my life for me, it's too much. I totally agree. Strangely, he said those words with some kind of conviction, as if he wasn't just agreeing with me, but formulating a principled position. After breakfast, we went back into the living room. Kevin sat down in the same chair where Bradley had sat yesterday and looked around. His gaze lingered on the pictures on the mantel, on the bookshelves, on the antique vase that stood on the coffee table. Nothing has changed since my last visit, he observed. Everything's in the same place. Why change anything? I'm comfortable with everything in its place. That's right. Why change what works? There was that special tone again, like he wasn't just talking about the arrangement of furniture. Kevin, I get the feeling you're not just here to see me. Did something happen? He paused, as if deciding whether to tell the truth. Mom, do you remember how our phone conversation ended yesterday? I do. You said you loved me. I said I loved you back. And we said goodbye. And then you disconnected the phone? I told you. I don't remember exactly. I think I just put it down and went to make dinner. Why? Kevin got up from his chair and walked over to the table where the phone receiver was usually lying. You see, Mom, sometimes it happens that people forget to turn off the phone, and then the person on the other end of the line can hear what's going on in the house. By accident, I felt my heart beat faster. What are you saying? That I heard Hazel and Bradley talking last night? The whole conversation, Mom, about selling the house, about the nursing home, that they'd already found buyers. It's like the world turned upside down. So it wasn't my suspicions, not an old woman's paranoia. Kevin had actually heard his sister and her husband planning to get rid of me. You heard? All of it? Unfortunately, yes. That's why I came here so early. I needed to make sure you were okay and discuss what we should do. We? Yes, Mom. We? Because I'm not gonna let them make you sell the house and move somewhere you don't want to go. He sounded so determined. I was so relieved. So I'm not alone. That means there's someone who will stand up for me. Kevin, what exactly did you hear? Tell me exactly what you heard. He sat back in his chair and leaned toward me. They've got it all planned out, Mom. Bradley knows the price of your house, $350,000. They have a specific place they want to put you, some Sunset Gardens, and they're going to use the money from the sale to buy a new house in Clarence. Sunset Gardens. I remembered the flyer I found on the table after they left. Yeah, Bradley had left an ad for that place. So they weren't just talking. They're already exploring options, gathering information. What else have you heard? Kevin sighed heavily. Unpleasant things, Mom. Bradley said that if you don't agree voluntarily, they'll find ways to coerce you. Something about senile forgetfulness, the possibility of a declaration of incapacity. The blood rushed to my face with indignation. So they're willing to go that far. They'd declare me crazy just to get my house. Bastards, I whispered. Yes, Mom. Unfortunately, yes. But now we know what they're planning, which means we can prepare. Prepare how? Well, there are a few options. But first, you really don't want to sell the house? No way. It's my home. It's my life. Then we'll protect it, Kevin repeated, and there was such confidence in his voice that I felt the tension of the last few days begin to let go. But how? What can we do against their plans? Kevin got up from his chair and paced the living room, clearly considering his options. He'd always done that since he was a kid. When he had an important decision to make, he'd walk around and think out loud. First, you need to make sure all your paperwork is in order. Will, powers of attorney, deeds to the house. Second, it's worth consulting a lawyer about your rights and how to protect yourself from coercion. A lawyer? Kevin, I've never consulted a lawyer in my life. It's expensive. Mom, trust me. The cost of legal advice is nothing compared to what you could lose if you don't protect your rights. Besides, there are lawyers who give initial consultations to the elderly for free or for a nominal fee. I reflected on his words. Really, if Hazel and Bradley are this serious, I need professional help. Intuition and outrage alone are not enough. Do you know a lawyer like that? I will. I know a few people in Rochester, and they'll recommend a good one here in Buffalo. The key is to act fast before they make any moves. When do you think you'll do it? Tonight? If we can, we'll see a lawyer this afternoon. Say you want to check your paperwork. Make sure everything's in order. The thought of going to a lawyer still scared me. In my generation, such specialists were only consulted in extreme cases, when buying a house, making a will, or family conflicts. But now, it seemed, was the last resort. All right, I agreed. But how will we explain to Hazel if she finds out? Why explain? It's your right to check your own papers. It's nobody's business. Kevin pulled out his cell phone and began searching for lawyer contacts in Buffalo. Modern technology amazed me. This little box could hold information that would have taken hours of reference work in the past. There is one good option, he said after a few minutes. Morris and Associates, specializing in elder law. The office isn't far from here downtown. Are they open today? I'll call and find out. While Kevin was talking to the secretary of the law firm, the phone rang again in the house. I picked up the phone and heard my daughter's familiar voice. Mom, hi. What's up? What are you doing? Hi, honey. I'm fine. Just sitting with Kevin talking. Kevin? Where did he come from? Hazel sounded surprised, which I thought was insincere. He came in this morning. Thought I'd pay him a visit. I see. How long is he planning on staying? I don't know. We haven't discussed it. Oh, of course. Listen, Mom, I've been thinking about what we talked about last night. Maybe we should go see those places Bradley was talking about. Just to see them, no strings attached. I don't know, Hazel. I don't feel like going anywhere yet. But looking doesn't mean making a decision. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you'll find it's better to stay home. Kevin shook his head when he heard the conversation, indicating that he didn't agree. I'll think about it, honey. Good. What do you and Kevin have planned for today? Nothing much. We're gonna stay home and talk. Okay. Okay, Mom. I'll call you later then. Maybe I'll stop by tonight. Okay, honey. After I hung up the phone, Kevin frowned. She's taking an active interest in our plans, and suggesting that we go just to see is an attempt to drag you into the decision-making process. What do you mean? The psychology of influence. First, they show you the options, tell you the benefits. Then they tell you to think about it. Then they tell you it's worth a shot, and you end up halfway through the move before you know it. Is that really how it works? Mom, Bradley's an accountant. He's used to calculating options and planning. There's nothing random about their behavior. It's a deal, he announced, putting the phone away. 3 o'clock this afternoon. Mr. Morris can accommodate us. What should I bring? The deeds to the house, the will if you have one, your passport, and any other papers that might pertain to your estate. We went up to my bedroom, where an old secretary held all the important documents. Raymond had organized this system while he was still alive, each paper in a separate folder, all signed and dated. Order in documents is order in life, he used to say. It was an hour before my meeting with the lawyer. I made a light lunch, a salad and soup I'd been cooking since the morning. Kevin ate absent-mindedly, obviously thinking about his upcoming conversation with the lawyer. At 2:30, we got into Kevin's car and drove downtown. The Morris and Associates office was in an old building in downtown Buffalo. High ceilings, massive doors, solid furniture, everything created a feeling of reliability and professionalism. Mr. Morris appeared to be a pleasant man of about 55, with graying temples and attentive eyes. He listened to our story patiently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, and scrutinized all the documents. Mrs. Fields, he said at last, your rights as a proprietress are well protected by law. No one can force you to sell the house against your will. However, I recommend that you take a few preventive measures. What kind of preventive measures? I asked. First, you should update your will and make your intentions for the house clear. Secondly, you could put a power of attorney in your son's name in case you need help managing the property. Third, I suggest that you notify your children in writing that you do not intend to sell the house. What if they try to declare me incompetent? That would require serious medical reasons and a court order. From what we've talked about, it sounds like you're fully competent. But just to be on the safe side, I recommend a medical examination and a mental health certificate. Is that necessary? Not mandatory, but it's advisable for your peace of mind. If someone tries to question your competence, this certificate will be an additional defense. The meeting lasted about an hour. Mr. Morris explained in detail my rights, my options for protection, and the possible actions of my relatives. Kevin asked practical questions about procedures and timelines. How much will it cost? I asked at the end. The initial consultation is free for pensioners. Drafting a new will, $300. Drawing up a power of attorney, $150. If you need to represent your interests in court, a separate conversation. On the way back, we drove in silence. I was digesting the information I had received, and Kevin was probably making plans for further actions. What do you think? He asked as we pulled up to the house. I think Mr. Morris is right. I think we need to be on the safe side. So, we'll do the paperwork tomorrow? Yes, and thank you, son. It would have been hard for me to sort all this out on my own. You're welcome, Mom. I told you we'd protect your rights. We went inside, and I noticed the red light on the answering machine was blinking. Several missed calls. See who called? I asked Kevin. He pressed the play button. The first message was from Hazel. Mom, it's me, calling to see how you're doing. I'll call you back later. The second message was also from her. Mom, where are you? I'm worried. Call me when you get this message. The third message was recorded just half an hour ago. Mom, I'm on my way to see you. Is something wrong? Why aren't you answering your cell phone? Kevin looked at his watch. If she left half an hour ago, she'll be here any minute. What should I tell her? The truth. That we were traveling on business. You don't have to tell her the details. Not 10 minutes later, Bradley's familiar car pulled into the driveway. Hazel got out of it with a worried look on her face and headed quickly for the door. Mommy, she exclaimed when I opened the door. Thank goodness you're home. I was so worried. What's wrong, dear? Why were you worried? I called all day and you didn't answer. I thought something was wrong. We were just out on a business trip, Kevin said calmly, appearing beside me. What kind of errands? Hazel looked at her brother carefully. The usual stuff. The store, the bank, the pharmacy. I see. Hazel obviously did not believe this explanation, but did not argue. I was thinking of taking my mom to see those places we talked about. Maybe tonight? It's late tonight, I said. I'm tired from traveling. Tomorrow then? We'll see. Hazel stood for a few more minutes, clearly hoping to learn more about our business, but Kevin and I remained silent. Finally, she said goodbye and left, promising to call every day. She's definitely suspicious, Kevin said as the car went around the corner. Let her be suspicious. The important thing was that now we knew our rights and how to protect them. We spent the evening quietly discussing the details of tomorrow's visit to Mr. Morris for the new paperwork. I felt more confident knowing that I was not alone in this fight and that the law was on my side. The next morning, I woke up feeling like something big was ahead. Kevin was already up. I could hear him fumbling around in the kitchen, probably making coffee. The October sun was shining outside my bedroom window, but the air was getting really chilly, a sign that winter was coming soon. Coming downstairs, I found my son at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and some kind of piece of paper in front of him. He was writing something down, occasionally tapping his pen thoughtfully on the countertop. Good morning, I said, heading for the coffee maker. You're up early. Good morning, Mom. I couldn't sleep thinking about the conversation I had with the lawyer yesterday. What did you come up with? That we need to be on the offensive as well as the defensive. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. There was some sort of plan on a piece of paper, a few points written in Kevin's clear handwriting. What do you mean, offensively? Mom, Hazel, and Bradley think you don't know anything about their plans. They think they can operate covertly, gradually coaxing you into a voluntary decision. But we know the truth. So, so it's time to set the record straight, to tell them straight up that their plans have been exposed, and explain what the legal consequences of their actions might be. The thought of direct conflict with my daughter terrified me. All my life, I had tried to avoid open confrontations in the family, preferring to solve problems peacefully. But now, apparently, the peaceful way was impossible. Do you think this will help? I think that when they realize that their secret is out and their actions may have legal consequences, they will abandon their plans. And if they don't, then at least we'll know where we stand. And we will be able to make decisions based on the real situation, not on guesses and assumptions. At that moment, the phone rang. I picked up the phone and heard Hazel's familiar voice, but this time it sounded somehow especially cheerful and purposeful. Mom, good morning. How did you sleep? How are you feeling? I'm fine, darling, thank you. Listen, I was thinking, what if we went to see that compound Bradley was talking about today? The weather's nice, we have time, and Kevin could come with us. He'd be interested too. Kevin shook his head at his sister's suggestion and gestured for her to say no. I don't know, Hazel. I don't really feel like going anywhere. Mom, please, it's not like you're making any decisions. You're just gonna look around, make up your own mind, and then you'll decide with full information. Honey, I told you before, I'm not moving anywhere. But sometimes plans change. Life is unpredictable. Maybe in a year or two, you'll want to move to a place where you have health care and don't have to take care of a house. Kevin took the phone from me. Hazel, it's Kevin. What if you and I talk privately first? There's something I want to talk to you about. What is it? The sister's voice became wary. Why don't you and Bradley come over and talk? I think we can all benefit from it. Okay, we can be there in an hour. Great. We'll be waiting. Kevin hung up the phone and gave me a serious look. Mom, you ready to have a serious talk? I guess. What am I supposed to do? Just listen and watch. I'll talk, and you watch their reactions. It'll help you see how far they're willing to go. The hour passed quickly. I cleaned myself up, made tea. The usual activities helped with the nervousness. Kevin, meanwhile, went over the notes he'd been taking since yesterday once more, checking the internet for some legal information. At exactly 11 in the morning, Bradley's car turned into the driveway. Hazel and her husband got out of the car with somewhat puzzled faces, wondering what Kevin wanted to talk about. Come on in, I greeted them at the door. Kevin's waiting in the living room. Mom, what's going on? Hazel asked quietly, undressing in the hallway. Kevin's been weird this morning. I don't know, honey. I'm surprised myself. We went into the living room where Kevin was sitting in the same chair as the day before. Hazel sat on the couch next to her husband, and I settled into my usual chair. The atmosphere was tense, as if before a thunderstorm. Well, Kevin? Bradley said, trying to keep his voice light. What did you want to talk about? Something serious? Pretty serious, yes, Kevin answered calmly. It's about plans for Mom and her house. Hazel and Bradley looked at each other. I saw their daughter's face go a little pale. What plans? She asked cautiously. The plans you discussed the night before last after dinner. About selling Mom's house for $350,000, moving Mom to Sunset Gardens, buying a new house in Clarence with the proceeds. There was dead silence. Bradley froze with his mouth half open, and Hazel looked like she'd been slapped. I don't know what you're talking about, she said at last, but her voice shook. You do, Hazel, and Bradley understands too. You forgot that Mom didn't turn off the phone after we talked. I heard your whole dialogue, from beginning to end. Bradley was the first to come to his senses. Even so, we were just discussing options, making plans for the future. There's nothing illegal about that. Illegal? Maybe not. But immoral? Definitely yes. And potentially illegal too. What do you mean? Kevin pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket and unfolded it. Mom and I went to see a lawyer yesterday. Mr. Morris from Morris and Associates explained to us in great detail the rights of a property owner and the liability for forcing a sale. Hazel swallowed convulsively. Kevin, we're not forcing anyone. Bradley talked about how if Mom doesn't agree voluntarily, you'll find ways to coerce her. He mentioned senile forgetfulness, the possibility of a declaration of incapacity. That's coercion, Hazel. That's not what he meant. What did he mean? Kevin looked directly at Bradley. Explain, please. Bradley was clearly struggling to find the right words. I was just thinking about possible scenarios. At your mother's age, anything can happen. Sometimes the elderly do become forgetful, and then relatives have to make decisions for them. And sometimes relatives create situations that can be interpreted as forgetfulness, Kevin replied coldly. The lawyer explained that attempts to artificially create grounds for declaring incapacity are punishable by law. No one is creating anything, Bradley blurted out. We're just looking out for Ruth's welfare. Concerned? Kevin grinned. Bradley, you said Mom would become a liability, that we needed to act before the house went down in price, that she had 5 or 10 years to live. Is that a concern? Hazel covered her face with her hands. Kevin, stop. No, I won't, because you're out of line. Mom is not an obstacle to your dream home in Clarence. She's a living person with rights I intend to protect. What about you? Bradley turned to me. Ruth, do you really think we mean you harm? We are genuinely concerned for your welfare. I was silent for a few seconds, watching my brother-in-law's face. It wasn't concern in his eyes, but irritation at the plans being revealed. Bradley, if you were thinking about my well-being, you would have asked me what I wanted, and you decided for me that I wanted Sunset Gardens and you wanted my house. We wanted to explore our options before we offered you. You wanted to put me on the spot, I interrupted him. And if Kevin hadn't happened to overhear your conversation, you would have continued to act covertly. Hazel pulled her hands away from her face. Her eyes were red, but I couldn't see any remorse in them, just frustration at the unfortunate coincidence. Mom, you do realize that sooner or later this issue is gonna come up, right? You can't live alone in a house this big forever. Why can't I? Who decided that? Life decides. Age. Circumstances. My age is my business. My circumstances are my business, and I will make my own decisions about my life. Bradley got up from the couch and paced the room. It was obvious that he could hardly contain his irritation. All right, he said at last. Let's say we didn't act right. We didn't consult. We didn't explain. But that doesn't change the point. Ruth, you're 72 years old. You live alone in a house that requires constant upkeep. You don't have health insurance that covers serious illnesses. What happens if you get sick? Who will take care of you? I will, Kevin said calmly. You live in another city. You have a family, a job. I'll take a vacation if I have to. Or I'll hire a caregiver. Or I could move my mom in with me. There's a lot of options, Bradley. You just didn't consider them because they didn't give you $300,000. It's not about the money. Of course it's about the money. You told Hazel yourself you needed that money for a down payment on a house in Clarence, so don't pretend it's only about caring, Hazel cried quietly. But they were not tears of remorse, but tears of anger and frustration at the failure of the plans. Kevin, you've got it all wrong. I'm getting it right, Hazel. You decided that Mom wasn't managing the house, that it was time for her to retire, and that it would be convenient to solve your financial problems. It's a classic scheme. We don't have financial problems. No? Then why do you have a house in Clarence? Why do you need $350,000 of Mom's money? Bradley stopped in the middle of the room and looked at Kevin with obvious distaste. You know what, Kevin? You paint us as some kind of monsters, but we're just practical people. Yes, we want to improve our living conditions. Yes, we think Ruth would be better off in an institution. Yes, those two issues can be dealt with simultaneously. Where's the crime here? The crime is you didn't ask Mom's own opinion. You decided for her that she'd be better off. And when she said she didn't want to move, you started planning to coerce her. We didn't force anyone. Not yet, but we were planning to. And the lawyer explained that even planning to force an estate sale could be considered fraud. Is that a threat? Bradley took a step toward Kevin. It's information. Mom knows her rights. She has legal backing, and any attempts at coercion will be thwarted. Hazel stopped crying and looked at me. Mommy, do you really think we want to hurt you? Don't you realize that we care about you? I looked at my daughter for a long time, trying to find in her eyes the girl I had raised and loved. But all I saw was a grown woman who wants to solve her problems at my expense. Hazel caring is asking what a person needs and helping them get exactly what they want. It's not deciding for them what they need and forcing them to take it. But sometimes people don't understand what they need, and sometimes people understand it better than anyone else. I've lived 72 years, Hazel. I've raised 2 children. I've buried my husband. I've been through a lot of hardship, and I know exactly what I need. And what do you need? She asked quietly. To stay in my house and live the way I want to live, with no outside interference and no care that I didn't ask for. Bradley snorted. Fine, live the way you want to live, but when something serious happens, don't count on our help. Bradley, Hazel pulled him back. Bradley, what? Let him know. We offered a reasonable solution, and we're being labeled as criminals. All right, we understand. But let Ruth know that she's on her own from here on out. Fine, I said calmly. I'm fine with her being on her own. Kevin got up from his chair. Mom is not on her own. She has a son to support her in everything she does. And you have your own family and your own life, Bradley objected. We'll see how long your enthusiasm lasts when you need real help. That's my problem, Kevin said coldly. And your problem is finding other ways to buy a house in Clarence. Hazel got up from the couch. We're leaving, Mom. Think about what we talked about. If you change your mind, call me. Hazel, Kevin stopped her. One more thing. The lawyer advised to notify all interested parties that Mom does not intend to sell the house. Consider yourself officially notified. Understood, she said dryly. They packed up and left in silence. Hazel didn't even give me a proper goodbye, just a nod. Bradley didn't pay any attention to me at all. When the door closed behind them, I sank into the chair. My hands were shaking from the stress I'd been under, but I felt strangely relieved. How are you feeling, Mom? Kevin asked, sitting down on the couch. I don't know, sad and calm at the same time. Sad that I had to fight with my daughter. Relieved that the secret was out. They can still change their minds. When the emotions subside, Hazel will realize she was wrong. I'm not sure. Bradley's not the type to give up easily. Hazel listens to him. Then let them go their separate ways. The important thing is, now they know you're not to be trifled with. Thank you, son. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you would. You're stronger than you think. We sat in silence, each of us thinking about our own things. The sun was shining outside the window. The birds were singing in the old maple tree. Life went on. But something had broken in our family, and we didn't know if it could be fixed. Maybe some things aren't worth fixing. Maybe it's better to have an honest fight than fake harmony. After Hazel and Bradley left, The house fell into an unusual silence, not the usual peaceful silence of the evening, but a tense one, as if the air still held echoes of the recent confrontation. I sat in my chair and slowly realized what had happened. My family had split, possibly forever. Kevin paced around the living room, occasionally going to the window and looking outside, apparently checking to see if Hazel and Bradley had returned. But the driveway remained empty, only the fall leaves swirling in the wind. "Do you think they'll give up?" I asked, breaking the silence. "Honestly? I don't know." Kevin stopped by the fireplace and leaned against the mantelpiece. "Bradley seemed stubborn to me. And Hazel? She's always had a tendency to go along with stronger characters. She was such an obedient little girl as a child. Never argued, never nagged. I thought that was a good thing. Maybe too obedient. She hadn't learned to stand up for herself." I thought about what he said. Indeed, Hazel had always preferred to avoid conflict, to agree with the opinions of those around her. At school, she was friends with the class leaders, even if she didn't like them. At the institute, she chose the specialty that her parents advised, although she herself dreamed of something else. She married Bradley not out of love, but because he seemed like the safe choice. "Maybe I was wrong about her upbringing," I said quietly. "Mom, stop blaming yourself. Hazel is a grown woman. She's responsible for her own actions. But children are a reflection of their parents. If she grew up like that, doesn't mean you're a bad mom. Look at me. I grew up a normal person, and we had the same upbringing." Kevin came over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. "People make their own choices, Mom, and Hazel chose material gain over family. That's her choice, not the result of your mistakes." At that moment, the phone rang. The sharp sound made us both wince. Our nerves hadn't yet had time to settle down from the morning scene. I looked at Kevin questioningly. "Answer it," he said. "Let's see what they came up with." But the voice on the phone wasn't Hazel's. It was a man I didn't know. "Mrs. Fields? My name is Richard Stone. I'm a realtor with Buffalo Realty. I received a call about an appraisal of your house for possible sale." Kevin, hearing the realtor's words, came closer and gestured for me to put him on the phone. "Excuse me, but who exactly called you?" he asked. "A Mr. Bradley Thompson. He said he was representing the owner of the house." "Mr. Stone, I'm Mrs. Fields' son, and I'm here to inform you that Mr. Thompson has no authority to represent my mother. The house is not for sale." "But, Mr. Thompson said that there was a tentative agreement." "There is no agreement, and if Mr. Thompson contacts you again, I recommend that he get a notarized power of attorney from the owner." I see. Sorry to bother you." After Kevin hung up, we were silent for a while, digesting what we had heard. "They've already contacted the realtor," I said. "So this morning's conversation hadn't stopped them." "Apparently not. But now the realtor knows Bradley's acting without your consent. That's gonna make it harder for them." "What if they find another realtor?" "They will, but we'll stop them every time. And sooner or later, they'll realize it's not worth it." The phone rang again. This time it was Hazel, and her voice was cold, official. "Mom, it's me. I have a question for you." "Yes, darling. Are you really going to thwart any attempts to help you? Even if we find the perfect place where you're comfortable and safe?" "Hazel, I didn't ask for your help finding a new place to live. I'm happy where I live. But things can change. You could get sick. You could fall down. You could fail to keep your house. When and if that happens, I'll decide what to do." "What if you can't make decisions? If something serious happens to your health?" Kevin took the phone from me. "Hazel, it's Kevin. If something happens to Mom, I'll be the one to make the decisions. As the next of kin who has no financial interest in selling her house. You live in another city. That's my problem. My mom made a new will and a power of attorney in the event of her incapacity. It's all legal. There was a long pause. Then Hazel said in a quiet but angry voice, I see. So you've already decided everything without me. We protected Mom's interests from those who tried to take advantage of her. I'm her daughter. So what? That gives you the right to control her property? It gives me the right to take care of her. To take care of her, yes. Forcing her to sell her house, no. Hazel hung up. The dial tone sounded sharp, like a slap in the face. She's angry, Kevin said. Very angry, and I can see why. In her mind, we deceived her, went behind her back. In my mind, we protected your rights from those who would abuse them. The rest of the day was relatively uneventful. Kevin helped me sort through the paperwork we got from the lawyer, explaining what each paper meant, where what was signed and what it did. See, Mom, now all your rights are protected. If anyone tries to challenge your legal capacity, it'll take a trial and a medical exam, and you have an up-to-date mental health certificate. And the power of attorney? Power of attorney only authorizes me to act on your behalf if you can't make decisions for yourself, and only in your best interests. What if you have a fight with your wife? If Susan wants me to sell the house and move in with you? Kevin laughed. Mom, first of all, Susan and I don't fight on issues of principle. Second, I will never force you to move in, even if it's convenient for us. What if you need money? If the kids have problems, medical expenses? Then I'll ask you for help, honestly and openly, and the decision will be yours. That evening, while we were eating dinner in the kitchen, the house phone rang. It was a message from Bradley on the answering machine. Ruth, it's Bradley. I realize we didn't have a very good conversation this morning. Maybe we should meet again, discuss things calmly. I have some suggestions that you might find interesting. Call me when you have time. I don't believe him, I said, listening to the message. And you're right. He's trying to get back to negotiating, but from the other side. What do you think he'll offer? Probably some kind of compromise, like you stay in the house but make a will in their favor. Or you sell the house, but you keep some of the money to live in the nursing home. Do I have to answer him? You don't have to, but if you want, you can tell him you're not interested in negotiating further. The next morning, Kevin had to leave back to Rochester. He was packing up the guest room, and I was making breakfast, trying not to think about being alone again. But being alone didn't scare me anymore. I knew my rights were protected, and my son would always be there for me. Mom, if anything happens, call me right away, he said, coming down with his suitcase. Any weirdness, any attempts at pressure, I'll be there the same day. Okay, son, but I think after yesterday they'll realize that it's useless to go any further. I hope so, and if they don't, we're ready for defense. Before he left, he checked the locks one more time, left me the phone numbers of a lawyer and his friends in Buffalo who could help in an emergency. And remember, you don't have to see anyone if you don't want to. Not Hazel, not Bradley, not their lawyers or realtors. What if Hazel just wants to talk, like mother and daughter? That's up to you, but be careful. After everything that's happened, any visit from her could have ulterior motives. After he left, I stood on the doorstep for a long time, staring at the empty driveway. The house seemed too quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet, not of loneliness, but of peace. For the first time in days, I felt safe. In the afternoon, the phone rang. Hazel spoke softly, almost in a whisper. Mommy, can I come over, alone, without Bradley, just to talk? Talk about what, dear? Us, about family. It can't be that we're all fighting over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Hazel. It was an attempt to take my home away from me against my will. Mom, I know what we did was wrong, But we can fix it, can't we? A compromise? What kind of compromise? I'll come back. We'll talk. No Bradley, no plans, no paperwork, just mother and daughter. I was silent for a long time, thinking. On the one hand, Hazel was still my daughter, and I wanted to believe that there was still something of the girl I'd raised in her. On the other hand, my trust was shattered, and any meeting could be a new attempt at pressure. Okay, I said finally, come. But if you start talking about selling the house again, this conversation is over. It's a deal. Hazel arrived an hour later. She looked tired, older, and I guess the last few days had been hard on her too. We sat down in the living room, and I noticed her looking around as if she were seeing the room for the last time. Mom, I want to apologize, she began, for planning something without your consent, for not asking for your opinion. Thank you, dear. I accept your apology. And I want to explain. Bradley thinks he's doing the right thing. He really cares about your future. What do you think? Hazel paused, searching for words. I think we should have talked to you openly. Explain our concerns. Listen to what you think. And what are your concerns? You're getting old, Mom, and sooner or later you're gonna need help, and we live far away, and so does Kevin. What if something serious happens? Then we'll deal with it. When it happens, not before. But it's better to be prepared in advance. Hazel, I stopped her. We agreed not to talk about the house. Yes, I'm sorry. We didn't talk. Outside the window, the leaves of the maple tree rustled, the same maple tree under which my children played. How many years had passed? How many changes had taken place in our lives? And now the family's split over money and real estate. Mom, and you forgive me? Hazel asked quietly. I don't blame you, dear. You've fallen under your husband's influence. That's understandable. So we can still be a family, like we used to be? I stared at my daughter for a long time, pondering her question. Can we remain a family after everything that has happened? Is trust possible after betrayal? Hazel, family is when people support each other, not take advantage of each other. It's about respecting the choices of loved ones, not forcing favorable decisions. I understand. If you're ready for that kind of relationship, then yes, we can still be a family. If not, it's better to be honest about it. Hazel got up from the couch and went to the window. She stood looking out at the street, then turned around. Mom, what if Bradley doesn't agree? What if he insists on doing what he wants? Then you'll have to choose between your husband and your mother. That's not fair. It's life, honey. Sometimes you have to choose. Hazel was about to leave. On the threshold, she turned around. Mommy, I'll think about what you said. Maybe there's a solution. There is a solution, Hazel. Leave things as they are. But it has to be one that you and Bradley can live with. After she left, I sat in my favorite chair and closed my eyes. The family was gone, probably forever. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel grief, but relief. It was as if I'd shed a heavy weight I'd been carrying on my shoulders for a long time. Maybe some relationships just wear themselves out, and better an honest breakup than a fake intimacy built on deceit and self-interest. The house stood quiet and peaceful as always, my home, where I'll live as long as I want, and no one would make me leave here against my will.